Dr. John Price opens the conversation by reflecting on the profound magnitude of suffering he has witnessed in his years as a therapist. Having accumulated over 28,000 hours sitting knee to knee with people enduring varied forms of pain, he recognizes that much of human suffering stems from a fundamental dissonance. Reality rarely matches our imagined expectations. This gap leads us to carry burdens, personal, relational, cultural, that shape and at times constrict our truest selves. Rooted in a Jungian perspective, Dr. Price emphasizes that suffering is not merely pathology, but an inevitable, universal experience that can also serve as a passage into growth and transformation. Drawing from Carl Jung's insights, he contrasts Jung's integrative and spiritually inclusive approach to Freud's deterministic worldview. Where Freud highlighted early life and environmental imprinting as dominant forces, Jung introduced the idea of a mysterious developmental vector that acts beneath and beyond conscious awareness, fostering initiation and expansion. This recognition of the unknown or ineffable invites a humility in our knowing and opens a space for healing that surpasses materialist or reductionist explanations. Suffering, Dr. Price asserts, is a natural part of life's polarities, especially life and death, and emerges when reality disrupts our deeply held expectations. Whether it be the body's vulnerability, the fragility of relationships, or the cultural fractures around us, suffering confronts us with the necessity of endurance. Rather than denying these burdens, he advocates for aligning ourselves with them, understanding that avoidance only allows pain to impose itself in more destructive ways. In this light, the spiritual maxim, "let go and let God," gains potency not as an abdication of responsibility, but as a surrendering to larger forces beyond ego control. Dr. Price touches on how modernity's intoxication with control and certainty exacerbates suffering, whereas ancient and religious traditions embrace the mystery and liminality of human existence. Recognizing suffering as an initiation shifts the narrative from victimhood to agency in transformation, provided the individual can access supportive relationships and spaces where vulnerability is met with empathy. At the core of therapeutic change, Dr. Price reminds us, lies the human relationship itself. Regardless of modality or theory, true transformation requires a deep connection where people feel witnessed and held without judgment. He shares a poignant anecdote of sitting with a suicidal man in a bathroom for hours, an encounter unstructured by technique but charged with presence. Such moments illustrate the miracle of authentic witnessing, an act that can create a ripple of healing both for the sufferer and the bearer of compassion. He highlights that many people lack genuine experiences of safety and acceptance, and therapists often begin their own paths out of personal wounds. The mirror of relationship crucibles are hidden complexes, inviting reflection and integration. When a relational partner can embody sacred witnessing, allowing a person to show their wounds and shadows, the deep hunger for connection is met and healing becomes possible. Conversely, relationships that weaponize vulnerability worsen isolation and suffering. Addiction emerges in Dr. Price's discourse as an adaptive but ultimately tragic surrogate for spiritual connection. Drawing on Jung's characterization of addicts as deeply spiritual people who have connected with the wrong spirit, he reframes addiction as a yearning for communion that is misdirected into substances or compulsive behaviors. This reorientation invites compassion over condemnation and highlights the missing communal and spiritual scaffolding in modern life that might otherwise hold and guide vulnerable youth and adults. He explains that effective treatment necessitates more than skill building or abstinence. It demands remembering what addiction has replaced. For adolescents, this often means rebuilding ego strength and social skills, teaching relational capacities that were missed in early development. For adults, communal connection, mentorship, and pathways that integrate spiritual practice become vital aspects of recovery. Without community and ritual, individuals remain vulnerable to relapse, and addiction continues to fill a cultural void. One of the central crises discussed is the erosion of communal structures that once marked critical rites of passage. Dr. Price recounts traditional practices, from bullet ant initiations to wailing rituals, that provided clear delineations, communal support, and meaning for individuals transitioning through life's stages. He laments modern society's failure to provide such frameworks, leaving countless people, especially men, adrift without markers of identity and belonging. Men, in particular, suffer from a contemporary epidemic of loneliness and disconnection. Statistics reveal a sharp decline in male friendships over recent decades, underscoring a void where mentorship, initiation, and community once thrived. This absence contributes to heightened addiction rates, violence, and psychological distress. Dr. Price and his colleague facilitate men's groups that strive to reclaim lost spaces for authentic connection and emotional exploration, enabling men to embody more expansive, authentic forms of masculinity beyond the narrow, often toxic models culturally prescribed. The conversation dedicates significant attention to the troubled state of masculinity in Western society. Dr. Price situates this crisis within the context of fractured culture, disparaged communal rights, and limiting societal narratives. Men are often taught to equate value with productivity, dominance, and stoic detachment, leaving little room for vulnerability or emotional fluency. This rigid masculinity becomes fragile, defensive, and prone to lashing out or withdrawal. He stresses the necessity of expanding masculinity to embrace authenticity, tenderness, and relational depth. Toward this aim, men's groups offer a container where vulnerability is practiced and honored. However, such growth requires safe community and cultural endorsement. Without it, men remain caught between societal expectations and internal needs, resulting in confusion, alienation, and sometimes destructive coping. This crisis intertwines with larger cultural pathologies, requiring systemic as well as personal transformation efforts. Dr. Price eloquently describes humans as storying beings, weaving narratives to make sense of the world and ourselves. While these stories are central to identity and survival, they can also constrain and distort reality, especially when rooted in unexamined trauma or limiting beliefs. Therapy often involves deconstructing rigid narratives, complexes in Jungian terms, to reveal broader truths and possibilities. He expands on the idea that stories are layered, referencing Dante's notion of multiple interpretive perspectives, allowing for allegorical, moral, spiritual, and historical meanings coexisting within a narrative. Healing comes from recognizing these complexities and allowing new stories to emerge, stories that acknowledge suffering but point toward growth. This process mirrors the mystical invitation to dwell in ambiguity and paradox, rather than clinging rigidly to fixed interpretations. An insightful philosophical dialogue arises around the nature of truth and reality. Dr. Price and his interlocutor explore the Greek etymology of truth as without forgetting, underscoring a relational, intimate aspect of spiritual truth as remembering one's essence rather than solely representing empirical facts. This ties into the idea of dual-aspect monism, the universe as one substance expressed in dual forms of matter and mind or psyche. Such frameworks situate human experience within both measurable and ineffable realms, affirming that while science offers invaluable knowledge, it remains incomplete without acknowledgement of mystery. Embracing this mystery prevents dogmatic certainty and encourages humility. This stance invites a walk with the unknown rather than control, reflecting a deeper engagement with what Dr. Price calls the spirit of the depths. Crucial to Dr. Price's therapeutic philosophy is the concept of sacred refusal, the intentional, grief-laden act of letting go of old adaptive patterns that once served survival but now hinder growth. Using powerful imagery, from a young girl's early onset addiction to the hermit crab shedding its shell, he illustrates how transition involves a vulnerable liminal phase marked by disorientation and uncertainty. This unfolding dismantling is not a quick fix, but a difficult passage requiring ritual, community support, and profound self-compassion. Sacred refusal honors the value of what is lost, even as it opens space for new emergence. Recognizing and ritualizing this grief process is crucial in breaking cycles of addiction, attachment, and limiting identities. This process acknowledges the necessity of paradox, confusion, and death for psychological and spiritual rebirth. Dr. Price dives deeply into human psychology's shadow realms: shame, disgust, fear, and self-delusion. He stresses the importance of naming and sharing these disgusting parts of ourselves to dismantle their power. While vulnerability is culturally stigmatized as weakness, it is in fact the path to genuine connection and liberation. The therapeutic container enables one to grieve fully and disclose stories long hidden, dissolving shame's isolating hold. The paradox that makes this hard is also the key. Fear of rejection by others often binds us, but when vulnerability is met with witnessing and acceptance, it becomes the crucible of healing. Partnerships, communities, and therapy can provide mirrors reflecting our authentic selves and invite us beyond performance into genuine being. Towards the end, Dr. Price offers tangible counsel for those beginning their journey into healing. He encourages even simple acts such as speaking struggles aloud, to trees, the sky, or a journal, as initial steps toward embodied honesty. While recognizing the terror that such exposure can invoke, he highlights how committed relational contexts, whether therapists, trusted partners, or communities, are indispensable. Men's groups, in particular, provide relational spaces where vulnerability is practiced, conflict is navigated, and adaptive growth is fostered. These groups help men explore their inner and outer lives and take ownership of projected emotions. Through such processes, participants learn to dismantle reactivity, develop emotional fluency, and reweave integral narratives that connect them more deeply to themselves and others.